Well, for more, let's bring in Ryan Mauro. He's a national security analyst for the Clarion Project. And Ryan, a lot of tough talk, threats and sanctions against Turkey. Do you believe it's all about Pastor Brunson's release, or is this just a melting point that President Trump and President Erdogan have reached after they've been on a collision course for a while?
We've had issues with Turkey and Erdogan for a very long time, but I was among many who were concerned about things that President Trump was saying in support of Erdogan, seeming not to care that he was becoming an Islamist dictator. There were ongoing Turkish influence operations, trying to influence anyone in Congress and anyone in politics, but especially the Trump administration. They did have some success. So having this break happen because Erdogan just went too far, because there's no gray zone under which he can defend detaining an American pastor. So I think he made a big mistake. But seeing this break happen is something that is actually very positive. And hopefully it makes the United States really recognize that there is a true alliance between Turkey, our supposed ally, Qatar, our supposed ally, and the Muslim Brotherhood and other radical Islamic terrorists. And we have to confront it. It's more than just a disagreement between two people with different points of views. We have an ideological and proxy conflict with Turkey and Qatar.
So we see that the Turkish currency continues to drop, and Erdogan doesn't really have much leverage on the United States, as you say. He knows that, though, and yet he continues to flex his muscles. Why?
Because contrary to how some have assessed Erdogan, he is not just a pragmatist who's out for his own power. He's not your typical dictator. He is an ideological tyrant. And he is a supporter of a radical Islamic movement that believes in reestablishing the caliphate, whether he calls it that or not. He and the government of Qatar regularly support Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood, and elements of al-Qaeda when it doesn't make sense, except for the fact that they support that agenda. And so hopefully from this break in the relationship between the United States and Turkey, we recognize these broader problems and handle them accordingly, instead of doing what we've been doing since 2002 and looking the other way and saying Erdogan is a moderate that we can work with, and if we have a fight with him, we can get past it because we just have common interests. No, we don't. Turkey is not the Turkey that we've been dealing with historically, and we have to really, and I think a lot about using this term, and I choose deliberately, we have to recognize that the Turkish government is an enemy of the West.
Ryan, let's talk about the end game here. How do you see this crisis coming to an end? I mean, do you think Turkey will eventually release the pastor? And then what? The relations, it seems like they'll probably never be the same again.
Well, it won't be the same again because now Erdogan is understanding that there are certain lines that he can't cross. Now, if the relationship is somewhat healed after the pastor is released, and I do believe he'll be released. Erdogan has a big ego, so he'll want to somehow claim victory. He's like Putin that way, similar personalities. But he recognizes that this doesn't make sense, even if he's pursuing a radical Islamic agenda, because he has an incremental strategy towards advancing what he wants to do. So eventually, I think Turkey will release the pastor. And then the big question at that point comes, will the Trump administration at that point have realized that this is the symptom of a much bigger problem that we have with Turkey, and one that, quite frankly, cannot be healed? And also, I hope that the crash of the Turkish currency makes us realize the opportunities we have in the Middle East to really stick it to our adversaries. You have the Iranian regime under tremendous pressure because of the sanctions that haven't even kicked in fully yet. You have the Turkish currency collapsing. Qatar's now saying that we'll bail out Turkey with $15 billion, which amounts to about $420,000 per family in Qatar. That's something that we should be using against the government of Qatar politically. So we have all these opportunities where if we want to shape the Middle East in our favor in a very decisive, noticeable way, that opportunity is right now.
So you say that Turkey is an enemy of the United States, an enemy of the West, and yet the United States and Turkey are both NATO allies. And being such, they do have some shared interests in different parts, different conflict of the world. So where does it hurt the most, the fact that the U.S. doesn't have a good relationship with a NATO ally right now?
Really, the only pushback that you'll get is that we have military bases there. But let's recognize the purpose of those military bases. We're the United States. We're a superpower. We can move a military base if we can put a man on the moon. And so there is this weird dynamic where a lot of people in Washington are saying, oh, we are dependent upon Turkey because our bases are there. No, that's Turkey being dependent upon us and somehow trying to switch it around to make it seem to be the opposite. We can adjust to having to the reality that Turkey is so adversarial towards the United States. And there are many problems with NATO going on right now. Turkey is the biggest problem. It just doesn't get the most attention. I think at the very least, the Trump administration has to say there needs to be an established process for kicking a member of NATO out. That process doesn't exist. Turkey will know we're talking about them.
Sure. All right, Ryan Mauro, national security analyst for the Clarion Project. Thanks.
Thank you.